Hello and welcome to WPLDN Daytime. I hope you're all well. Leo, Diane, Paul, thank you very much for joining me here. We are just checking, making sure we're all live everywhere that we should be. If you are joining us on live.bigorangeheart.org, we are currently over in the main track. So please do come and join us. Leo, could we check we've just got everything running?
We are definitely running on all the social media channels. I'm just checking the Big Orange Heart website is the only thing that I am not in. But
we are. We can see we're there. Excellent.
That's it. Great.
Love it when a plan comes together.
Yes, it's nice when all the technology works.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for joining us. If you are out there listening, as I say, we've now moved over to the main track. Where are we? Let's just make sure everything is up and running. Some slides, as I said. Welcome. This is only our second WPLDN Daytime. So trying out something new here, trying out some different setups. We appreciate all of you joining us. If you were able to join us beforehand in the social, we'd love to hear some feedback on your thoughts around that, on the style, the ability to create new tables and move around and have different conversations. We hope you are able to partake in that. We will be leaving the social open throughout the event, so please feel free if you want to continue the conversations. Of course, we're over here in the main track, with Hannah Smith giving her talk, which we are very excited about. Looking forward to hearing that. But before that, we've just got a few things we want to quickly mention. These events are thanks to a team of volunteers which collectively make the Big Orange Heart. Big Orange Heart is a registered charity that is supporting and promoting positive well-being and mental health within the remote working communities. If you're interested in getting involved, if you're interested in supporting these events or being part of the team in some way, or just simply want to connect with the community, then bigorangeheart.org/join is the place that you need to be. So, just want to very quickly welcome all of our hosts. Myself, Dan Maybe. I am the founder of Big Orange Heart. Also get involved in a lot of these WordPress-focused events and other events across the community. I'm grateful to be able to be here with you all at the moment. Next up, Diane. Do you want to just quickly introduce yourself?
Hi, hello. I'm Diane, and I'm a freelance WordPress theme and plugin developer, and also co-host.
Excellent. Leo.
Hi, I'm Leo. I run a digital sports agency called Sotic. We help governing bodies and federations work in WordPress. As you can see, I'm wearing the Lions top because I'm just hopeful that it's all coming back slowly.
Excellent. And last but definitely not least, Mr. Paul Smart.
Hi everyone, Paul Smart. I run a small agency just outside London called Smart Digital and also work on the sponsorship team for Big Orange Heart. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. And speaking of sponsorship, just very quickly want to say a big thank you to all of our sponsors for enabling us to be able to deliver these events. Passionate about making the web a better place, Automatic, your managed cloud hosting platform, Cloudways. A turnkey solution for product vendors, agencies and developers, Dolly. Generate more leads for your digital agency, Funnel Packs. The WordPress multilingual plugin, Weglot. Tips, tricks and resources for people who use WordPress, Winning WP. Your all-in-one WordPress platform, WP Dev. And the search engine optimization plugin for WordPress, Yoast. I'd really appreciate it if you could all help us in saying a big thank you to our sponsors. It's down to these companies that are enabling us to be able to deliver well-being and mental health support into the community and running events such as this. So I'd really appreciate it if you could, in a new tab in your browser, drop in that URL big.ht/thanks, and that will put together a nice little tweet that will then send out to all of those companies, thanking them for their for their efforts to support Big Orange Heart and these events. Also, just want to thank our supporters, Blue37, Paul Smart and Sotic, for dedicating time, volunteering time into these events. So thank you very much. If it wasn't for, as I said, these team of volunteers, we simply wouldn't be able to deliver these events. So on to this afternoon. Hannah, as I mentioned, is going to be speaking. Hannah will be talking to us about a really important topic, talking about our impact on the environment in relation to web development, web design and development. Really looking forward to hearing this. But before that, it's an opportunity for our community announcements. On the website, if you are in live.bigorangeheart.org, on your the right-hand side of your screen, you should have a live chat facility. If there is anything that you're aware of going on in and around the community, then please feel free to drop your comments in the live chat there. We'll try and get your comments up on screen. If you're aware of anything that's going on relating to the open source community, relating to WordPress, PHP, wider communities, then feel free to drop them in. There may be an event, you may be looking to hire, you may be looking to be hired. It's just an opportunity really for you to virtually stick your hand up and say, this is going on, and let's share it with the community. So whilst we wait for anybody to add those in, then we've got a few things. We've mentioned this a few times. The Make team have put together this page, which has a list of virtual events that are going on across the community right now. There's obviously been a huge amount of events, WordCamps, Meetups, etc., that have had to do something along these lines of move into a virtual event. We've actually got currently listed on this page today 18 live events happening today. So I just want to say a big thank you to each and every one of you that are joining us right now. It's it's an honour to have you with us when there is so much going on at the moment. I don't know how about your experiences, Diane, Paul, and Leah, around these kind of virtual events. What they've been like so far.
So I think it's been an experience to see how some of these are working, some of them are not. Definitely the talks and everything are really good. The talks, I don't feel any different. The ability to watch and listen to some excellent speakers. WordCamp EU has excellent speakers, and we've got a stunning person coming up shortly. However, I think sometimes the interactivities can be difficult. And I think it's just down to the sheer factor that when you've got 20, 30 people on a Zoom call or an equivalent product, you end up with one or two people taking the limelight. I don't know who they are, but you do have that.
Oh, yeah, it's probably me. It's been really positive, actually, how quickly the community's moved to virtual events, and you've been able to still feel connected with the community. Everyone's kind of trying to find their own way, and there's lots of different ways of doing things. And I know we've gone through several different platforms, and but this could be the winner. But how quickly it's come about has been quite impressive. And I think that what's really nice is that the fact that all of these events now, the local meetups, have become quite international. So there's been some real positives come from this.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yes, it's interesting. I mean, along those lines, we'd really appreciate your feedback. Maybe if you want to drop them in the live chat around the platform, if you had an opportunity to join us in the social, and of course we'll continue. We'll open up another. We'll keep the social open throughout the event. So it would just be good to understand what how you're finding it as a platform for you to be able to communicate and connect with the community. And on that, the virtual events, obviously we've just had WordCamp Europe. I hope we all managed to get some opportunity to spend some time in there. I know my experience of Europe was very, very different in that it was quite easy for life really to kind of get in the way, I found. I think that the talks that I did get an opportunity to spend time in were fantastic. And it was so good to see so many friends, obviously virtually, but it's quite easy, I think, for things to take priority, isn't it, at this time?
I think that's absolutely right. Last year's WordCamp for me was the first one I'd been to of WordCamp Europe, and it was just an absolutely stunning, stellar period of time with you guys here and many others that I'd met and have kept in contact with. This year just didn't feel the same, and that's really hard. And it doesn't mean to say that the guys that put on a brilliant conference didn't do a really good job. It's just that some elements that you go for, and I think it's down to what you're looking for a conference. If you're somebody who is always in the talks and are always taking notes and always getting there, you've got a very similar experience. If on the other hand you're somebody who is more aiming at spending time in the hallway track, spending time at various different events and the social things, then it's just hard to replicate, and that's just life. It's just a bit of a shame.
That's
but
right.
that doesn't mean to say that the people who put on WordCamp Europe, they just did a great job. It was smooth.
Absolutely.
They did, the technology worked
in such a short space of time as well.
Absolutely. And I'm really glad that they followed our lead in using the same technology we use.
Yes. Swiftly moving on. I appreciate time is actually rapidly disappearing. We're already 5 minutes over. So very, very quickly. WordCamp US has announced is now fully online. So October 27th to 29th. Again, another opportunity for us as a global community to come together for an event that possibly a number of people were unable to attend in the past. So very much looking forward to that. I think more details are coming on that. The sparse2020.us.wordcamp.org has got some information about what's going on there. Something I just wanted to quickly bring up out of WordCamp Europe, actually, out of Matt and Matthias's discussion. It was actually discussed in the social just now. Was the live demo in relation to the new image editing coming within WordPress. I don't know. Have any of you had an opportunity to take a look at this at all?
Not yet, no. But
No.
No, not for
I
me.
think I think what was really interesting, I think it was Yoast actually had flagged a question in relation to an API for this and the use of the API for images that are being added. And I think that's really interesting that you could, upload one featured image and then via the API obviously push out a resized image, the most appropriate size for social media. I think that's a really quite exciting way of using it. And yeah, it was interesting to hear Matt confirm that would that was on the roadmap in terms of the API.
There's a lot that we, as many people comment on the fact, and you've probably got the next slide up, although I think it was last time we put it up, it was 17 years, WordPress is 17 years old. So you actually do expect to see technology change massively in that time. And we know that the big adoption and the way that things are moving is we're not going to be WordPress isn't just going to be something for delivering sites on the internet, as in websites, HTML browsers. It's going to be used as a content management system to deliver to many different formats and platforms. Social media and apps are going to be a big part of that. And that's great to see that from the center that people are sitting there going, what can we do with this and how can we make this better? So I think it's great.
That's right. Absolutely. Excellent. I think, where did we see? I think Gary had one. Gary Jones. Welcome, Gary.
Gary's putting lots of questions, but it's almost like he wants to be an organizer again.
Excellent. For those of you that aren't aware, Gary used to volunteer and had spent many years supporting this event. So, Gary, thank you very much. And has flagged up, as I've shown down the bottom there, WordPress VIP are hiring, wpvip.com/careers. Okay, I'm going to very swiftly move on through the rest of these slides because we're rapidly running out of time. WPN has evolved, has pivoted into Big Orange Heart. Big Orange Heart, as I mentioned at the start, is a charity that supports and promotes positive well-being and mental health within the remote working communities. We have just published our Open Transparency Report. If you visit big.ht/open, you will see there how we are, through 2019, on a monthly average, The cost to deliver this charity to the community came in at £10,251 per month. Delivering over 7,500 hours of free support into the community meant that wellbeing and mental health support was being delivered at an average of £16 an hour. That obviously is a cost, and we need companies to support us. This charity is reliant on sponsorship. You may notice, as we've been talking, various sponsors' logos all over the place. We are looking for more companies to come and join us and to be part of this. So please, if you are part of a company, if you are a decision maker, if you are an employee, then please do help get this message out. big.ht/sponsor for more details. And equally, donations are incredibly important. If I could ask, if you have the ability to, £10 a month, $10 a month, it makes a huge difference. big.ht/give. I appreciate these are incredibly difficult times, and we do support the message of being financially responsible at this time. So we do fully understand that this is a challenging time for all. Okay, sorry, I had to really rapidly run through those last few slides because we are a little bit over time, but I am now going to very happy to welcome Hannah on stage. Hannah, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Excellent. Really looking forward to this, Hannah. It's such an important topic for us to talk about, and certainly I think a topic that possibly isn't talked about enough within our space. So your talk this afternoon, tips on how to reduce the carbon emissions of your WordPress website. Really looking forward to hearing more on this. We're going to wrap up there now, give the stage over to you, and we'll come back for some questions afterwards. If you are listening on live.bigorangeheart.org, then please do, if you have any questions, drop them over in the live chat, and Hannah will be sure to bring them up on screen in the live Q&A afterwards. So have we got your slides up?
Just on the case with that. As you know, I have some jiggery pokery to do with all my screens back here.
It's always a joy, isn't it? These new times, these new ways of delivering these events.
It's challenging.
It certainly is, yes.
Okay, so they're there and ready to be shared.
Oh, there we go. Okay, I'm going to duck out and the floor is yours.
Oh, awesome. Thank you so much. Great. Well, thank you, everyone, for taking the time out today to listen to this talk. Dan gave me a nice introduction there. So I am talking about tips on reducing the carbon emissions of your website. So before I get into that, let me just do some introductions. So let me introduce myself formally. So hi, my name is Hannah Smith. I live in Bristol. Much like Diane, I'm a freelancer and I work really doing word development with WordPress. I have a lot of experience around management. So I worked at the Environment Agency for 6 years doing management stuff. So people, projects, processes. And I do a lot of speaking and writing as well, because I love sharing knowledge. Some of you may have met me before or come across me before, because I was the co-organizer of the Bristol WordPress Meetup and also co-organizer of Bristol WordCamp 2019. But I've stepped away from organizing WordPress events at the moment, and I've recently co-founded a new meetup based in Bristol called the Green Tech Southwest Meetup. Okay, so that's a little bit about me. Let's get into what I'm going to cover today. So the aim of today's talk is not to give you an in-depth guide into all the things you can do. The aim of today's talk is to float some ideas by you and point you to some resources that you can use to further educate yourself and reduce the carbon emissions of your website. So one of the key things I want to do with this talk today is to provide some knowledge about what the environmental impact and carbon emission impact is when we use the internet stroke ICT stroke websites. We'll talk a little bit more about the sort of muddiness of those terms in a bit, but I'm going to start off with a bit of an overview, and then we'll talk about tools and approaches that you can use. think whenever you define what something is, you should define what it isn't. So what this talk is not hating on the internet or WordPress. I mean, that would be kind of bonkers given that I'm a WordPress developer and that's what my career is in. I love the internet, and I think the internet is very empowering for all kinds of people. And I think the recent lockdown has perhaps made more people realize just how important the internet can be. So in no way, shape or form am I hating on the internet. The vast majority of my points and my critique is about the waste that we have, and we'll come on to that. This talk is not about explaining climate science or the climate crisis. We simply don't have the time to get into that. And I'm going to make an assumption that those of you in the audience today have some level of knowledge about climate change, climate science. I'm going to make these slides available on Twitter right when I finish, and you'll see lots and lots of links in these slides. So if you're interested in finding out more about climate science, you can have a look at the IPCC website, which is the International Panel on Climate Change. And the last thing that this talk isn't is statistically exact, because that is just really, really, really hard when it comes to estimating precisely the carbon emissions associated with various technical activities that we have. I do give numbers and I do give statistics, but I can't impress upon you strongly enough to please take those with a pinch of salt. And just understand that those numbers are there to give you a guide about the possible impact rather than to be taken as hard, fast numbers. And I've credited all the sources that I've used. Okay, so that's a little bit of an intro. Let's get into it then. So tools and approaches that I find useful. I think it's useful just to start off with saying to you, if you've come along expecting a talk today that is only going to talk about tools and code, I'm sorry, I think you're going to be sorely disappointed. Because actually reducing the carbon emissions of the websites that you are producing is not just a tool or a code problem, a toad problem. It's actually as much a behavioral, educational and mindset problem as it is a tool and a code problem. So I wanted to make the point really, really early on in this presentation that we can already make an enormous difference by educating ourselves about climate change. And you're already doing that by being here and listening to this talk today. So thank you for making the time. And changing our mindsets and changing our understanding of waste and what value is and what sustainability is. We can make an enormous difference by using existing best practices. There's loads and loads of information and knowledge out there about performance of websites. We know that performance is good for selling more and for marketing and for user experience, but it's also really good for the environment too, when done in the right way. We'll come on to that. We can also make a big difference by just culling data that we won't use. Today's talk is a little bit shorter, so I won't go into it so much, but we can make a big difference by not having as many analytics running on our site, by not storing endless amounts of backups, and by culling data that we're simply not using. I read a really interesting statistic just on the weekend, I think, about saying that 80% of data collected for analytics is never even processed. It's never analyzed. Wow, I mean, that's kind of nuts. And we can also make a big difference by not using hardware or even software that we don't need. So I guess my first message to you really is, with any problem that you're trying to solve, be it a coding problem, be it a social change problem, knowledge is power. So take the time to understand what's going on. Okay, so I just wanted to set the scene with that. Let's get into talking about the environmental impacts of tech. Now, some of this might be really new to some of you. You've maybe never heard some of these statistics before. You've maybe never stopped to think about it. I've been environmentally minded ever since I can remember, even as a kid. I would, make sure we recycled everything in the house and pick through the bins. And I don't know, I've just always been that way. And I have to confess that it's only within the last year that I have realized what a what an impact tech does have on the internet. Sorry, let me try that again. It's only in the last year that I've realized the impact that tech has on the environment. I'd never really stopped to think about it before. So for some of you, this may be stuff you're aware of. For some of you, you might be right at the start of your journey. I'm going to signpost you to lots and lots of resources, and I'm just going to say there's a couple of points that I'm going to bring up that could be a little upsetting for some of you. So I'll give you a warning before that comes. Okay, so let's just start off with an overview. So the internet's total life cycle carbon footprint is approximately 730 million tons of CO2. That puts it in the ballpark of being around 1.4% of global carbon emissions. Now, the first time I came across these numbers, I was like, yeah, okay, great. What does that mean? I've got no idea how to compare these numbers. So let's just put those numbers in perspective for you. What is 730 million tons of CO2? Well, that amount of CO2 is roughly equivalent to the amount of fuels burned by the aviation industry. It's not a direct comparison. It's not the same as the life cycle of the aviation industry, because the life cycle takes the manufacture and creation of mechanical devices, or in our case, technical devices. But the life cycle of the internet and of tech is on a par with the fuels burnt by the aviation industry. I find that quite shocking when we talk so much about how bad aviation is for the environment, yet we barely hear a whisper about the impact of tech. And another way of looking at that number is that if the internet was a country, or if tech was a country, it would come in as the 6th biggest polluter. So I hope that gives you some context of the overall impact. I'm going to dig a little bit deeper into this now. Now, manufacture of devices, I started to talk on that, touch on that a little bit. Because today's talk is short, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about this, but I'm just going to give you some high-level things to consider. So manufacturing uses energy. That's no great surprise, but it uses a lot of energy. So 70 to 90% of the total pollution caused by making a digital device, so a phone, a laptop, a server, is created during its manufacture. So the actual use of the device is perhaps not as polluting as the manufacture of the device. And smartphones in particular are very energy intensive. So they're right at the upper end. They're at 90% of the pollution. So we, as people working in tech and creating content for these, it's useful for us to be mindful of this. Now, I gave you a sort of a little bit of a warning. When we start looking at, so I gave you a little bit of a warning about some of this stuff may be uncomfortable. And what I'm about to say next is incredibly uncomfortable. But one of the key things that people are not aware of, and I myself have only become recently aware of, is the environmental impact of mining raw earth metals that go into our devices. Cobalt is a particularly good example. Cobalt is found in lithium-ion batteries, which are found in sort of electric cars and phones. And the mining of that particular raw earth metal is very polluting, and also is linked to human rights abuses in various African countries, the Congo in particular, where there's a lot of evidence to show young children are being forced to work in these mines to produce these earth metals for us. It's very upsetting to think that something like our phone could be creating that sort of damage, but unfortunately it is a real thing, and it is happening, and we need to be aware of it. So I thought I'd mention that. There's some slides there. Sorry, there's some links at the bottom of the slides there. There's a load of research that The Guardian did about mining in the Congo, and it's worth having a look if you haven't come across this information before. But again, I can't warn you strongly enough that it is upsetting to understand this information. But be aware, it is a thing, and it is something we should be aware of. So when we're thinking about manufacturing, the takeaway I'd like to give you is, as people who are interested in managing the environmental impact of the websites that we're creating, remember that the websites we're creating are viewed on devices. So ask yourself, can you repair a device, or can you, better yet, avoid upgrading a device? And this works for servers and hardware, as well as laptops and smartphones as well. So please bear that in mind. Okay, so now I'm going to get a little more into the use of tech and talking a little bit more about that environmental impact. So the environmental impact of using tech basically boils down to the manufacture, which we've talked about, and then the use. And the use of tech requires loads and loads of electricity. It comes as no great surprise, but it's quite a lot of electricity. And when you start looking into it, it's quite surprising. So it's actually estimated that about 3.6% of global electricity is just for powering devices and internet usage. Now, this wouldn't be an issue if energy production was emissions-free, but it's not emissions-free. The reality is that around 478 grams of carbon is emitted for every kilowatt hour of electricity that we produce. So kilowatt hours are a standard unit of measurement for talking about a quantity of power. So in 2018, there's about half a kilogram per kilowatt hour. So that is quite a significant amount of CO2 being produced when you start to think about the amount of electricity that tech is using. So if all energy was emissions-free, we'd be in a great place, but it's not. The reality is that in 2017, 65% of the world's energy came from fossil fuels and only 25% from renewables. 10% from nuclear. I'm personally on the fence about what I think about nuclear. It has its own issues, and let's not go there now in this talk because there's much other stuff to touch on. But we know that fossil fuels are definitely bad for the environment, and we know that fossil fuels are a big problem when it comes to controlling our CO2 emissions. So the amount of electricity that we're using is still, we still need to think about it. So this is an interesting fact, and if those of you that are on the chat, I'd love for you to sort of put your own thoughts in here, and of course during the talk as a whole, if you want to let others know about certain things that I'm talking about, or share your feedback, that would be very welcome. I find this statistic quite amazing, and I'd love you to have a guess. So can you guess for me the percentage reduction in the ICT sector's carbon footprint if we switched all of our tech to using renewable energy sources? So what sort of percentages do you feel, what kind of gains do you think we might be getting? I'll just pause for a minute and let you have a think and hopefully pop something in the comments. Okay, so it's actually 80%. And this 80% comes from a recent guide put out by Ericsson. Again, it's linked at the bottom of the slides, which is a really, really, really great resource to read if you're interested in knowing more in depth about this. So it's estimated that if we just switch to renewable energy, all of our ICT use renewable energy, we could reduce our carbon footprint by 80%, which is kind of a no-brainer here in the UK. I appreciate in other countries it's not as easy, but for us in the UK, we have a lot of access to renewable energy. So here we go. Here's a really great takeaway. Switching your use of tech to run on renewable energy makes a really big difference. So you can switch your hosting company and have a look at whether your hosting company is running on renewable energy. Switching your home or office supplier as well. And talk to this about your family and friends. It's not as hard to switch energy company as people often think. I think what I need to do at this point is just caveat what I'm saying though. And renewable energy, whilst it's a really, really big improvement on fossil fuels, it's not a panacea. It's not going to just magically fix all our problems. Like a new piece of code or a new tool doesn't fix the problems. There's often more to it than that. And the sort of hidden conversation that we're not really having about renewable energy at the moment is that renewable energy does still have an environmental impact. We still have to create machinery to run it. We still have to have infrastructure to create it and store it and manage it. But it is less than fossil fuels, so it's definitely moving in the right direction. And it should be encouraged, because you can't go from zero to hero overnight. You have to iterate and transition in the right direction. So it's not a panacea, but it is worth considering. So when I think about this stuff, my sort of starting point is that when I'm looking at trying to reduce the amount of electricity that any one piece of tech that I use or responsible for, when I'm trying to reduce that carbon emissions, the first thing I'm doing is thinking, how can I reduce the overall amount of energy that this tech, this website, this device needs? The manufacturing stuff is a little bit out of my hands, but I can do something by not buying as often. And certainly performance and demand is something within my gift as a web developer, and we'll talk about that a bit more in a sec. So once we've reduced the overall amount of energy that tech needs, we then can switch the energy that is needed to being used, to being generated from renewable resources, renewable sources. Okay, I'm just going to briefly touch on some trends here. When we talk about usage and demand of the internet, it's really useful for you to be aware that usage and demand is massively, massively on the up. So we're sending more and more data around the internet than ever before. And so you can see from 1987, when the internet roughly first appeared, to 2017, the explosion of data. Hopefully you can see the slides clearly, and in the bottom right-hand corner is an explanation of what each of these units of measurement are. So we have terabytes, petabytes, exabytes, and zettabytes. So it's predicted that by 2022, we'll be sending 4.8 zettabytes of information around the internet per year. Now, a lot of that comes down to video streaming, but not all of it. And if we have a look at some data from the HTTP archive, we can see how page weight has changed over the last 5 years. So on desktop, it's grown by about 1.6 times. So from 2014 to 2019, we've seen about 1.6 times more kilobytes are making up every single web page that's being downloaded. Well, it's a median number, but gives you an idea. And on mobile, it's even greater growth. It's 2.5 times bigger. So that's a big change. Now, my question, and what I can't help wondering, is, are we getting mobile experiences that are 2.5 times bigger, or are we just working off the basis that data is cheap these days, so we think we can just use it? The thing is with data, with our bandwidth, is that yes, it is cheap, but that doesn't mean there's not a cost. And a lot of these costs are being borne in ways that we are not aware of at the moment. You know, we talked a little bit about the manufacture of devices. There is a cost, and we're not necessarily as consumers paying that cost. It's not all doom and gloom, though. There is some really great news here, and efficiency is also on the up. So this graph comes from an absolutely brilliant paper. If you're into the detail and you like reading academic papers, I can't recommend this paper strongly enough. It was published in 2018, and it shows evidence to say that although the overall demand increased, the overall data demand increased, the amount of data we're sending around the internet, the energy and the carbon footprint did not grow in proportion. You can actually see from the graph it flattens off. So my question is, well, that's great. So tech is improving and becoming more efficient. What could we do if we got a handle on the demand? So there's some sort of high-level information for you. I've got about sort of 5 or 6 minutes left, so I'm going to go through and signpost you to some things that you can look at to use on your own WordPress sites. So let's start off with a tool that I'm a huge fan of for determining a website's carbon emissions. Some of you may have come across this before. It's the website carbon calculator, and that has been created by Whole Grain Digital, who are a WordPress-based agency in London. I'm sure many of you know them well. This tool is absolutely brilliant. You can put any URL in, and it will give you an output of how dirty or clean a website is in comparison to others. If any of you want to try it out now, let us know what websites you're putting in and what your kind of scores are. That would be a great thing to see pop up in the chats. It's a really great exercise to do. So that is an amazing tool, and I can't recommend it highly enough to get you started. Again, I can't stress strongly enough, you can't take the numbers literally. They're there to give you a guide. So please take them as a guide rather than hard, cold, precise numbers. Okay, we can't talk about the carbon emissions of the tech without talking about data centers and servers and hosting. So there is a great unit of measurement that you can use to understand how energy efficient a data center is, and it's called the PUE, Power Usage Effectiveness. I'm sure many of you will have heard of it before. If you haven't, there's a Wikipedia page and you can read all about it. And essentially what PUE says is it shows us how energy efficient data centers are by doing a comparison between how much energy is used by the computing equipment, so actually running the service, in comparison to how much energy is used to actually run the data center. So the cooling and the overheads and so cooling and overheads. So to give you a guide, if you're researching data centers, a PUE of 1.2 is a really, really great score, and that's considered very efficient. So something to research and look into if servers and data centers is something of interest to you. Another absolutely fantastic resource for looking at hosting and servers is the Green Web Foundation. This is an amazing non-profit organization run now. Chris Adams, who I believe used to be an organizer of WordPress London, is one of the directors of this. And Chris is an absolutely fantastic voice in the community of understanding the environmental impact of tech. So Green Web Foundation is really worth checking out. They publish data sets of which providers run on green energy, and those data sets are open data and available as SQL-Lite data sets. And the website Carbon Calculator uses their data sets to analyze whether servers are running sustainably or not. And the Green Web Foundation have also developed a Lighthouse add-on called Greenhouse. So if you run Lighthouse, which is a tool for looking at the performance of your sites, and if you run Lighthouse through the command line, you can make use of Greenhouse as well. It's really quite cool. So for those of you that are perhaps more in control of your hosting and your infrastructure, there's a few bits of advice I'd like to share with you now. So I know in the WordPress community, we have had some really fantastic campaigns around using the latest version of PHP. That's because the PHP 7 engine got completely rewritten and is a lot more efficient, like twice as fast as PHP 5.6. So therefore, it uses a lot less CPU energy. And if you're using less CPU energy, you're using less electricity. So if you need another motivation to get your version of PHP upgraded, here's one. You can massively help the planet and reduce the carbon emissions of any tech that you're running. So have a think about that. Using a CDN, a content delivery network, really helps reduce the amount of electricity that's required to transfer your data from one end from the data center to your device. So it can really help with reducing your environmental impact because data has to travel from the data center to your device. If it has a short geographical distance to travel, it's going to require less energy. Another thing that many of us will already know, but it's a further reason to do it, is to have good caching set up. Another kind of tip I've recently added in is considering serving static sites. And I think a lot of progress has been made in this over the last year or so, even the last couple of years. Some of you, and in fact, I think you had Miriam speak quite recently, you will have heard about Static before. Now, Static at the moment don't talk about the environmental impact and improvements that using their services can have, but they're quite significant actually. So a static web page is simply a web page that's delivered to the user's web browser exactly as it's stored. So it's all rendered out in advance and you don't have this dynamic generation of content, e.g. database queries being done on the fly, or perhaps cached and served up. You have a bunch of HTML pages ready to go at any point. So it's faster and more secure, but also better for the environment as well. So that's actually on my to-do list, is to start really getting into Static and seeing if there is, if I can make use of this as an average WordPress developer. Is it ready for someone like me to make use of now? And again, I'd love to know in your comments if anyone is using it. I think, Dan, maybe you are with Big Orange Heart. So love to hear your thoughts on that. Okay, so 3 or so minutes left. I'm just going to talk about some tools and approaches for making your content more efficient. So we've talked a lot about hardware and servers and data centers there, and there's tons of stuff you can do, and services that you can buy. You don't have to do it all yourself. But the vast majority of us, when we're using WordPress sites, are content creators or are working directly with the content. We already know that we should be making WordPress sites efficient because that's good for usability, but it's also good for using less electricity on your device and at the server end. So when we get started with thinking about efficiency for reducing carbon emissions, what we need to be aware of is that the speed of page load isn't actually the metric we really want to be thinking about, because you can serve bloated content quickly. What we need to be thinking about is to reduce our emissions is only serving the bytes of data that actually matter. And at the moment, the web and the internet is awash with data waste. It's all over the place. I already mentioned that 80% of data that's collected for analytics isn't even looked at. It's not even looked at. So I think all of us as people working in tech can take responsibility for only serving and collecting and storing the bytes of data that matter. And of course, we can borrow loads of great ideas from the web performance community to do this. Google page speed scores give us helpful clues. This is a great set of data. It comes from the HTTP archive, and this shows from mobile what types of data were being sent to make a median web page. And you can see that the vast majority of data is for video and images. So there's some huge wins that you can make by paying attention and streamlining your media. And when I talk to new clients, a lot of clients say, well, look, what can you as a developer do just to make this problem go away for me? And I often have to have a conversation with them and say, well, actually, the best results come from us working together. It's a responsibility of the developer, but it's also a responsibility of the content editor to both care about media and to both take action. One of the things that I love to talk about is, oh no, I'm not coming to that, but yeah, sorry, forget that. I wanted just to say that as developers, something that we can do is make sure that images are lazy loaded and that video is not auto playing. And one of the things that I love to talk about with my clients is what happens when you just simply reduce a JPEG file, a JPEG's dimensions and quality. You can really, there's some really easy low fruit here. This is a picture of my dog Lily in my office. When I took this picture, the picture was, you can see the dimensions in the bottom corner here, about 3,800 pixels wide and nearly 3 meg in size. Just by resizing that image to the correct dimensions, you can reduce it down to 716 kilobytes. If you then save that image out as a lesser quality, which you can't really detect on the screen, but you can, if you were to print it, you may not want to do this, but on the screen, your eye can't really see the difference. So a 70% quality image takes it down to 231 kilobytes. 45% takes it down to 114 kilobytes. 10% takes it down further. 3% takes it down further. Now, I have actually used different images in each of these slides here. And by the time you get to see Lily at 3% quality, she may be looking quite blurry for you. But if she isn't looking blurry for you, I've just managed to use a 44 kilobyte image instead of a megabyte image. So there's a real education piece here about reducing the quality of your images. So I'm going to skip through these last few bits because there's actually loads and loads of information out there about how to optimize and manage your images when you're with WordPress. So in order to save time, hopefully you can have a look at these slides afterwards and have a look at some of the resources that I'm sharing and adding here for you. Okay. So I think I need to just briefly touch on JavaScript. JavaScript, I'm not going to say a lot about JavaScript, but just be aware that JavaScript heavy use of JavaScript will mean that your device, your mobile phone in particular, will use a lot more power in order to process and manage that JavaScript. So be aware that the use of JavaScript, particularly in the front end, does have an impact on carbon emissions and will cause devices to use more power. So all you're doing is shifting the power from being used in a server to being used on a phone. So there's something to bear in mind there. And this article that I've linked to here, some of you may have come across it before. It's a really in-depth article and analysis about how different types of web content affects power usage. And I should also mention to you that adverts use huge amounts more power as well. Adverts are typically drawn in with JavaScript. And actually, there's a tool that I've linked to here where you can test the website speed with and without an ad blocker and see what the carbon emission impact is from just using an ad blocker in your browser. It's quite significant. Okay. So sustainable UX and design, again, many people in the WordPress community are designers and content creators. So I wanted to put a little bit of content in for you as well. A key thing to bear in mind when you are designing content, designing themes, or customizing the back end of WordPress, create your design so that your users can complete their goal quickly. Because every single page that you're making a user click around for is a waste of energy and therefore has a carbon emissions impact. So it's another reason to be efficient and to think about sustainable, to think about user experience. A very few quick tips on designing content. So have a think about whether you can ditch carousels and sliders because they're not particularly fast loading. Users don't really like them and they definitely slow your page down as well. Full screen images should be used sparingly. So it's lovely to have a big hero image, but do you need them all across the page? Something to think about as designers. Auto-playing background videos are bad, and loading in lots of different fonts also has an impact too. And again, I've touched on this already. As WordPress developers, we are often responsible for customizing the back end of WordPress, as well as creating a customized front end experience too. So don't forget that you can communicate and educate your content editors by putting reminders in the admin area. Okay, so I have gone a little bit over time. Sorry, Dan, I did try my best not to do that. Anyway, so I'm going to summarize. So our website's actually a problem. Is tech actually a problem for the environment? Well, it's a politician's answer, I'm afraid. Yes, tech is a problem because we all need to halve carbon emissions every decade to keep global temperature increases to safe levels. And every sector has to reduce its impact, including us. And we are lucky within the tech sector because I honestly, truly believe there's a lot of low-hanging fruit that's available to us, that we could just do a few things differently and make a big impact. And I mean, no, they're not a problem. I'm a big advocate for tech and ICT because it has the potential to reduce carbon emissions in other sectors. The fact that we can now meet online rather than having to travel is a great example of that. And actually, tech has already been responsible for identifying 15% reductions in other sectors across the board. So tech has its role to play, but we just need to use it wisely. So that's my key point. It is a source of carbon emissions, and there's a lot of it that's pointless. We only should be serving the bytes of data that matter. And if you're brand new to this, do the stuff first that has the greatest impact. Switch your hosting to something that runs on renewable energy and pay attention to your media. And please get talking about this with your teams. I've got loads of other resources within the slides here, and I'll share those slides with you so that you can find them. And that leaves me to say thank you very much. Thank you for giving me the platform and the time for today, and over to you for questions.
Hannah, thank you so much. That was a fantastic talk. So much good content across all of this. And it's such an important topic and such an important subject to be covering. We've got several questions come in, but I just wanted to start off with talking about the huge benefits that can be gained from considering the impact when it comes to design, not just purely from a environmental perspective, but also from the user's experience and from the way we can interact with sites. And you've obviously touched on this in your talk, and I just think it's so important to keep going through that and to keep bringing that up with clients. I mean, how is that? Have you, when you have these conversations with potential clients, is this a subject that you bring up? Is this a way that you frame the conversations with them?
It's a really great question. I don't sell myself or market myself as an environmentally conscious web developer. I know that there are some agencies that do. I choose not to do that. But what I do is I don't choose to work with clients that I feel are really products and services and are not in tune with my thinking. And I take a kind of temperature check when I first meet with a client, and I ask them some questions, and I say, is reducing your environmental impact something you're interested in? And nearly everybody says yes, but maybe that's because I live in Bristol and we're very, very in this kind of mindset here. And they'll say yes, and I'll say, okay, great. Well, I can work with you on that. Let's look at changing your hosting. And whenever somebody says, whenever I bring up changing hosting to a green supplier and I give them all these options, it's just a no-brainer. There's never resistance there. The content side of things, I have more battles with. Auto-playing videos. Yes, I still have battles with that.
It was interesting. Dorothy had picked up on this auto-playing videos, and I had to apologise because actually on this site we've got these every page you hit is an auto-playing video.
Well, there's maybe something to think about there. I mean, I do strongly believe and advocate that if it serves a purpose and it's well thought through and it's adding value, then it's okay. But what I have a lot of clients ask me to do is put stock photography in or stock videos that I don't think add any value to anything. So it's maybe something to think about. Does it need to be on every page? Could you maybe encourage people to click a button instead? There's always means and ways to think about things differently.
I'd absolutely agree with you there, Hannah.
The root of static is really interesting.
Sorry.
I think we had some crossover there, didn't we?
I was just going to the root of static, and Leo, you're obviously a big advocate across this as well with the work that you've been doing. Obviously you mentioned Static, which we are using for the Big Orange Heart site as a host, and it's a really interesting route to be taking. And Leo, I appreciate you've done a lot, haven't you, around the static?
Can you? It may have been my audio that broke up then. I think the approach that a number of people have taken, which is now to produce static websites, in a funny way, we've gone back to where we were a number of years ago when everybody was running static websites. I think the thing that I find from this, Hannah, is I look at something like in America and how they drive cars, and they're really, really keen when they get a miles per gallon of 22 miles per gallon when they were a standard 8 miles a gallon before. And it's just, do you just feel that we're now that changed to actually think about what we're doing with that technology rather than just saying, look at this, isn't this clever, we're making it work? Is the bit that you're bringing in, that how we're making it work?
I think so. I mean, I think that tech has come a long way, and what we can do in this decade, we couldn't do in the last decade. And I applaud that. I think it's amazing on so many levels. I do really, really think, though, we need to stop and take a good hard look at what we're doing and why we're doing it. I do feel that we've gotten a little bit caught up in this mindset of we're doing stuff because we can, not because we should. Look, I'm not preaching here. I'm guilty too. We all have to stop and think about what we're doing. But I really think that the planet is kind of crying out for us to hold ourselves a little more accountable for the way that we're burning through resources.
And I think going to the question that Dan was asking about Static, and Static is a provider of that service, or they're making that a commercial viable solution for people who build in WordPress. It is, I have a very similar solution, but it's in-house and we've been using it for a number of years. That approach, I believe, is to literally say, well, if somebody needs this image or somebody needs this piece of content, to have to sit there with your database, churning it out for every single request. It may only look like it's exactly the same thing, but it's the database calls and the calls to your web server, even if you've got something like Nginx sitting there, to effectively offload this and stick it in their country or on their ISP. Just, some of us will remember back to the days when you had Squid proxy servers, because that was the only way you could get stuff out. We're returning to using technology we forgot about.
You're so right, and I applaud that, and I hope that we can do that. Simple is good, right? In so many aspects of, be it working in tech, of creating content, of providing services, it always comes back to simple is the winner and simple is best. And I have to question, I've always been such a huge fan of WordPress. As I dig deeper and deeper into being more environmentally conscious, particularly with tech, I am starting to question, is natural word, default WordPress, vanilla WordPress, actually, is that okay?
That was a really interesting question that was asked to Miriam at Static at the weekend. Like, should the central core WordPress start evolving to be able to better support headless? Should that be part of the process? Because many of you who are out there who are using various different plugins will find the minute they try and turn on to using WordPress in a headless environment with plugins, will find loads and loads of the elements that they're used to, their go-to approaches, don't work. And that turns them off immediately, and they go, oh, this is too much like hard work. So it's finding that balance and moving that forward. And it's really interesting to see how you analyze that against other industries. And I really love the fact that, as you say, at the end of the day, we're all tech nerds. That's why we're here. But we have to balance that with what is a good thing and a bad thing. It doesn't mean to say everything is good or bad. It's just finding that happy medium. It's
true. There's shades of grey in all of this that we all need to be thinking
but there's
about.
Only one, and this is, and Hannah knows where I'm going to go with this. There's only one thing where there's no shade of grey, Hannah, and that's when it starts snowing.
I didn't think that's where you were going to go with it, but yes.
Oh, right. But you agree with me.
I love the sentiment, yes. So for those of you that don't know, I'm a very, very keen snowboarder, and I spend a lot of time in the mountains, and Leo and I have spoken a lot about snowboarding over time. So that's where that comes, just so you know what, we're not mad.
we are anybody who doesn't snowboard thinks we're mad, so
yeah, absolutely.
Excellent. Hannah, I just also wanted to very quickly mention, obviously you brought up the website Carbon website. Sorry, let me pull it up. Oh, Leo, we're fighting against each other. Website carbon.com. Great resource. Obviously, we've it's so easy to go in and test your sites. I think we just need to say a big congratulations to Chris Butterworth. I mean, that's a 98% cleaner website than the average sites, and it's really interesting seeing these tools and seeing these ways that we can track and monitor. And if we look at we run the Big Orange Heart site through that, we can see that it's the equivalent of 4 trees a year, which that's quite a lot. Now we need to look at how we can offset that and how we can support that and make help support a greener, more healthier environment. I thought it was interesting that we've seen the UK hit the first 2 months now without coal. We've just passed that point, yes. And these times, as difficult and challenging as they are, and on many levels, there's also potential opportunities here for us to look at how do we sustain some of these benefits that we are actually seeing from it.
So
I
true.
think it's amazing about the coal. I think it's just absolutely, and it's great, and it's why I changed my T-shirt to the word Camp Brighton, which has got the windmill on it.
Oh,
Which,
nice.
because
Yes.
that's it. They had that as their part of their thing in WordCamp Brighton last year.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what's so interesting about this coal thing, though, is that 10 years ago, the general consensus was we couldn't do it.
Mm-hmm.
We can't run a country on renewable energies. We can't be away from coal. And look where we are 10 years down the line. We've shown that we can do this stuff. And if we're all persistent enough and we talk about it enough and we're determined enough and we care enough, we can make these differences.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And there are ways. I mean, we used, for example, WordCamp London last year as a speaker gift. We chose to give a tree to each speaker, and just it actually was a relatively low cost gift. But what that then returns, what that then offers. I've got 5 of them growing in our garden right now, and they're flourishing. They're absolutely fantastic.
Nice.
But it's just looking for unique and unusual ways to support this and things like that.
Yeah.
There are options.
There are actually loads and loads of options. I'm just going to plug something really quickly, as I know we need to sort of wrap up quite soon. But I do want to just give a shout out to the climateaction.tech community. So if anyone is really, really, really feeling inspired by this kind of topic and feels really kind of pumped up to learn more and to engage more with other people, there we go. Chris has just put it in the live chat. Check out climateaction.tech. So it's a community of 2,200 people, technical people across the world who are all interested in using tech to improve our planet. So to be more sustainable, basically. There's a Slack channel you can join, very friendly and helpful community where you can ask questions and get advice, and a really nice weekly newsletter that goes out as well. So if you're interested in kind of getting more engaged in this and you want a starting point, I would strongly recommend that you go and check it out and head over to climateaction.tech.
Fantastic. Well, Hannah, that's a perfect place to wrap up there. Really incredibly grateful for you giving your time to come and share this with us. As I said, it's such an important topic. And really grateful that we have the opportunity to be able to talk about this subject within our community.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
Yeah, right back at you. Thank you for creating the space that we can have these conversations. It's really appreciated. Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. Lovely to be able to connect
Thank
with
you.
you. And,
Thank you, Hannah.
Just going to wrap up. So I'm just going to bring up some slides. Hannah, thank you very much. Okay, where are we? So as I said, we're just going to very quickly wrap up the session here now. Want to say a big thank you to all of our sponsors. If you have the ability to, please do thank them. big.ht/thanks. To Automatic Cloudways, Dolly, Funnel Packs, Weglot, Winning WP, WPMU Dev, and Yoast. We also have a feedback form that is focused around our virtual events. We really want to hear what you think of this format. Does we're continually iterating, continually evolving, and often testing live. So please, we would love to hear your feedback. Whether you do that via the form, whether you do that via social, whether you do that, whatever means you feel happy and comfortable doing, the WPLDN.UK/feedback page will redirect you to a Google form. It's entirely anonymous, so please do feel free to drop in your thoughts. Similarly, you can drop them in the live chat as we talk right now. So, next event is in 2 weeks' time, 25th of June. So that will be back to our evening WPLDN, our regular event. Really looking forward to this. We've got 2 fantastic speakers lined up for you. First up, we will be hearing from Matt Medeiros. Really looking forward to hearing Matt joining us from the US. If you've not come across Matt, be sure to check out the Matt Report podcast. It's very much focused around the business of WordPress. We've also got Jenny Wong is going to be joining us. If you've not I would say if you've not heard of Jenny, but I'm sure most of us have across the community, a fantastic advocate for the WordPress community, incredibly active across many places within the community. So really looking forward to hearing both Matt and Jenny join us. For the next WPLDN daytime will be 9th of July. How on earth are we talking about July already? 9th of July for the next daytime event. For now, we're going to head over to the social. Please feel free, jump in a table, move about, create your own tables. This isn't a case of we all have to jump into one call and stick in there. You feel free to use that and move about. We will be leaving this open for the next 24 hours, so feel free to use this. The social will be in there for the next 30 minutes to an hour, depending on how the conversations go. But as I say, we're also leaving them open for you. I want to say a huge thank you to my co-hosts, Leo, Diane, and Paul. Really incredibly grateful for you giving your time to help support this event. It does take quite a lot behind the scenes to make sure all of these things run smoothly. We're aware they don't. It does take a bit of time.
Don't jinx it. It's been going so well.
Absolutely, yes. Thank you all. I don't think, was there anything else anybody else wants to?
No, we will join you in the social once we turn off the live broadcast, and we will go over.
Absolutely, yes. So, as I mentioned, please do, if you are able to, we would really appreciate some support of Big Orange Heart. big.ht/give if you have the ability. But for now, that's it from us. We will see you over in live.bigorangeheart.org/social. See you all soon.
See you all soon. Bye, everyone.